This is a story that shocked the world, not because of how it ended, but because of how it got there. A young man sat alone in his truck, parked in a quiet lot. The engine was running. The windows were closed, and slowly the air inside was turning deadly. But what makes this story different is that he wasn't alone. On the other end of his phone was someone encouraging him to stay. Her name was Michelle. His name was Conrad. And what happened between them would later raise one chilling question. What would you do if someone you loved told you to die? Conrad Roy was only 18 years old. By all accounts, he was a quiet, sensitive kid. He struggled with anxiety and depression, often feeling like he didn't belong, like he was a burden to the people around him. He had tried to take his own life before. Then he met Michelle Carter. They weren't your typical couple. They didn't go to school together, and they rarely saw each other in person. Most of their relationship existed through text messages, long conversations that stretched late into the night. At first, Michelle seemed like a source of comfort, someone who understood him, someone who listened when no one else did. But over time, something changed. Their conversations took a darker turn. Michelle didn't just talk about Conrad's pain, she began to encourage it. Message after message, she pushed him closer to the edge. She told him he deserved peace. She told him his family would be better off without him. She told him it was time. At first, Conrad hesitated. You can see it in the messages. He was scared. He questioned it. He wasn't sure. But Michelle didn't stop. She kept pushing, telling him to stop overthinking, telling him he had to go through with it, telling him that tonight was the night. She even helped him come up with a plan. Carbon monoxide, a silent, invisible killer. All he had to do was sit in his truck and let it happen. On the night of July 12, 2014, Conrad drove to a Kmart parking lot. He turned on the engine, closed the doors, and began to fade. But at some point, something changed. Conrad got out of the truck. He was scared. He didn't want to die. In that moment, he reached out to Michelle. What happened next would become the most haunting part of this entire case. Instead of telling him to get help, instead of telling him to go home, instead of telling him to choose life, she told him to get back in. And he did. Those were some of the last moments of his life. Conrad climbed back into that truck, and this time he didn't come out. When his body was found, it looked like another tragic case of suicide. But investigators soon uncovered thousands of texts, messages between him and Michelle, messages that painted a very different picture. This wasn't just a young man struggling with depression. This was someone being pushed, manipulated, and encouraged to end his life. The case quickly made headlines across the country. People everywhere began asking the same question. How much responsibility does one person have for another person's actions? Can words alone be considered a weapon? Michelle Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Her defense argued that Conrad made his own choices, that she was just a teenager saying things she didn't fully understand. But the prosecution argued something far more disturbing, that Michelle created a toxic environment, one where she repeatedly pressured a vulnerable person to take his life. They pointed to the moment he got out of the truck, the moment he had a chance to live, and the moment she told him to go back. In 2017, Michelle was found guilty. The judge ruled that her actions, her words, directly contributed to Conrad's death. She was sentenced to 15 months in prison. But for many people, that didn't feel like enough, because this case wasn't just about one tragic night. It was about influence, about manipulation, about the power of words. Conrad Roy wanted help. You can see it in his hesitation and his fear, in that moment when he stepped out of the truck, searching for a reason to keep going. And instead of being pulled back to safety, he was pushed forward into silence. This story forces you to ask a difficult question. Where is the line between free will and coercion, between support and control? And in a world where so much of our communication happens through screens, how much impact can a single message really have? Because sometimes it's not just what you say, it's what you convince someone to believe. And in Conrad's case, he believed he didn't deserve to live. So now I'll ask you, if you saw those messages, if you knew what was happening in real time, what would you do?